If you were to look at, say, a tourism commercial or guide to California, they would show you beautiful ski slopes and Hollywood and celebrities, but in reality, California is devolving into a festering, disease-ridden, and drug-addled mess. It's complicated. There is a homelessness crisis that results in needles and disease and human waste. I'm going to warn you now, this video is going to be a bit gross. And I know that YouTube will likely de-rank this content because of how graphic it may end up being. It's an important issue that needs to be talked about. And we have some breaking news. Donald Trump is vowing to take action, saying he's going to slap San Francisco with environmental violation over their homelessness problem. Recently, in the New York Times, a story was written about how even though there's a Democratic supermajority in Los Angeles, they can't solve the homeless crisis. Even though the state is dominated by Democrats, they can't solve any of the problems plaguing their cities. We've seen a story recently. A man closing his business because homeless people keep biting him. A woman closing her business because homeless people are sleeping in front of her store and breaking in. The problems are getting worse, to the point now where we're hearing that there could be a resurgence in bubonic plague. I'm not joking. I have sources for this. And now there is a fear that there will be a return of leprosy into Los Angeles. Although I will give a caveat, the AP is pushing back on the story. I think it's worthy of highlighting, and I'll show you my sources. The latest news, however, is that Donald Trump is finally vowing to take action. Now, I can't tell you that a violation on San Francisco will solve any of the problems. San Francisco does try to some degree to deal with this. There's stories circulating about San Francisco's, I'm just going to say it, poop patrol. So I don't know if fining them will get them to do anything. They'll pay the fine and say, so what? They'll ignore the problem will get worse. And I can't tell you what's causing it. Other states certainly have homeless people too, and potentially more. But for whatever reason, California is devolving into a disease and drug-riddled mess. Let's read the first story from Daily Caller. I've got a lot to go through here. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com/donate if you would like to support my work. There's a PayPal option, a crypto option, a physical address, but of course, the best thing you can do is share this video. As I mentioned earlier, I guarantee this video will be deranked. It will be restricted in some capacity because it's going to get gross. And, you know, YouTube already deranks independent political commentary. So if you think I do a good job, the best thing you can do to support me is just share this video somewhere to help me continue doing what I do. But let's read the story from the Daily Caller. They say, President Donald Trump announced Wednesday that he plans to hit San Francisco with an environmental violation over the pollution and trash caused by the city's homelessness problem. Now, it's not just SanFran, it's LA. LA is really bad. You know, before we read on, I want to just tell you a quick story. I was recently in Los Angeles. I was in a major metropolitan area. I believe it may, I don't remember exactly where, but it was somewhere with a lot of busy traffic. I was parking my car and going to a store. I think it might have been like a Best Buy or something. I can't remember. Picking up some electronic component. When I parked my car in the lot, I noticed several homeless people. And they decided to do their personal business right there in public, in the street, in front of everybody, up against a wall. And I was kind of shocked because I was witnessing people shopping and doing their thing, and right next to me were homeless people doing their other more private business just out in the public. No one seemed to bat an eye. It seemed to be normal. This problem is part of why I left LA. I moved to LA a while ago with that dream of going to California, and I left like within a year because the dream isn't real. The city is messy. Now, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of nice places in LA. It's got beautiful, beaches in the LA County, I should say. And there are a lot of houses where you get by just fine, but the problem is visible. Let's read. They say the president told reporters on Air Force One that the Environmental Protection Agency will be sending out a notice within a week that San Francisco is in violation of regulations because of the amount of pollution flowing into the oceans. It's a terrible situation that's in Los Angeles and in San Francisco. He said, and we're going to be giving San Francisco, they're in total violation. We're going to be giving them a notice very soon. EPA is going to be putting out a notice, he continued. They're in serious violation. San Francisco has experienced an 18% rise in homeless individuals in the city since 2015. And the issue is causing the streets to be littered with human trash, feces, and used needles. An interactive map created in 2014 called Human Wasteland shows a heavy concentration of incidents of human excrement throughout the city. Trump added, they have to clean it up. We can't have our cities going to hell. Well, there have been several stories talking about the failures of Democrats in these supermajority cities and states, California being the most notable. We've seen a story from the New York Times, and now we have one from Forbes. Why California keeps making homelessness work. And I find this story truly interesting because he actually recognizes that after so many years of Democrats dominating the state and the cities, they haven't gotten anything done, and perhaps they need to change something. Let's read this story before we get into the more recent stories that are terrifying and about the escalation of disease. They write, on Tuesday, 15 officials from the White House toured Skid Row in Los Angeles with the head of a local homeless shelter. 4 or 5 of them were with the EPA. Rev. Andy Bales of Union Mission Church told me, that's because human waste flows into storm sewers. California is home to some of the world's toughest environmental and public health laws. But skyrocketing homelessness has created an environmental and public health disaster. The 44,000 people living, eating, and defecating on the streets of LA have brought rats and medieval diseases, including typhus. Garbage is everywhere. Experts fear the return of cholera and leprosy. And homelessness is making people violent. Quote, we are seeing behaviors from our guests that I haven't seen in 33 years, said Bales. They are so bizarre and different that I don't even feel right describing the behaviors. It's extreme violence of an extreme, I'm just going to say adult nature. They have been doing this for 33 years and I have been doing this for 33 years and never seen anything like it. Bale says he was one of the people who urged the U.S. government's Federal Emergency Management Administration to intervene. We've been crying out for a National Guard-like response, said Bales, whose church provides food, showers, and shelter to 1,350 people camped nearby. In 2016, Bales lost the lower half of his leg to a flesh-eating bacteria from contamination on Skid Row. How did things get so bad in California? The state has long prided itself on being humanistic and innovative. It is home to some of the world's largest public health philanthropies, best hospitals, and most progressive policies on mental health and drug addiction. The Democrats have a supermajority. What went wrong? According to Bales and other experts, California made homelessness worse by making perfect housing the enemy of good housing, by liberalizing drug laws, and by opposing mandatory treatment for mental illness and drug addiction. Other states have done a better job despite spending less money. This isn't rocket science, said John Snook, who runs the Treatment Advocacy Center, which advises states on mental health and homelessness policy around the country. Arizona is a red state that doesn't spend a ton on its services, but is the best scenario in every aspect. World-class coordination with law enforcement, strong oversight. They don't let people fall apart and then return to jail in 30 days like California does. What happened in California isn't the first time that we progressives let our idealism get the better of us. To understand how the current disaster unfolded, we have to go back in time, back to the post-World War II era when progressive reformers convinced themselves and others that they could destroy the country's system for dealing with the mentally ill and replace it with a radically different and wholly unproven alternative. And I fear we see a lot of this kind of policy coming from the left. Now, look, I grew up firmly on the left with Democrats, but you can see the rampant and rapid push towards far left policies. They're talking about abolishing ICE now. I don't think that's a solution. So I want to stress, here we have someone pointing out that they're a progressive and they haven't done it right. There's a meme. There are memes that talk about how Republican-controlled cities tend to be beautiful, clean, and prosperous, while the big major cities continue to fall apart and are led by Democrats. I don't want to sit here and act like it's solely the Democrats doing things wrong and Republicans aren't doing anything wrong, but it's hard to argue that point when it's repeatedly said. It's a fact. California is blue. The cities are overwhelmingly Democrat, and now we're at a point where Trump is intervening. Disease is on the rise, and the problem isn't being solved. So perhaps at some point, even people on the left must acknowledge something needs to change. Otherwise, we see this. Here's a story from May. Mountains of trash in LA could cause bubonic plague outbreak, according to an expert. It's not the first time we've heard this. This has been repeated several times now. I believe even Dr. Drew was saying it, maybe Dr. Drew here. But let's read a little bit. Trash is a growing problem for residents in LA. And as the garbage piles up, so do the rats, feeling concerns about flea-borne typhus, according to reports, and there have been typhus outbreaks. Last October, after at least 9 reports of the disease, LA officials cleaned up some of the worst piles of garbage. But now, the trash has accumulated once again, If they could clean it up before, why can't they continue to clean it up? I have to wonder. I can't walk down the street without thinking that a flea could jump on me, Estela Lopez, executive director of the LA Downtown Industrial Business Improvement District, told the outlet. It could reportedly take up to 90 days for the trash to be removed once again, according to NBC LA. The outlet also reported that the city has no plan for controlling its rodent population. So we've heard the story, and I don't want to rehash too much because you get it. Typhus, bubonic plague, yes, and now we have this. Leprosy. I can't actually show you the title of this article because the image is too graphic. But they say this is from Legal Insurrection. I have been covering the typhus and typhoid outbreaks that have hit Southern California as a result of the rat infestation around homeless encampments. Now an outbreak of a notorious disease, leprosy, is being reported. A recent study published as a Reuters health report indicates the bacterial infection is emerging in the LA area. Now what they link to is a PDF, and I haven't been able to verify that with Reuters Health, though Legal Insurrection is certified by NewsGuard as being, factual. It's got a green check mark. But I did find this from The Hill. Is a Dark Ages disease the new American plague threat? The Hill, it's an opinion piece reporting that bubonic plague could return. So let's slow down. I don't want to say definitively it is on the rise because that is being disputed. But this story, and the reason I think this is important, is they're talking about the threat of the potential for its return is here. Writing. Diseases are reemerging in some parts of the Americas, including Los Angeles County, that we haven't commonly seen since the Middle Ages. One of those is typhus, a disease carried by fleas that feeds on rats, which in turn feed on garbage and sewage that is prominent in people-packed typhus zones. He says, although typhus can be treated with antibiotics, the challenge is to identify and treat the disease in resistant, hard-to-access populations, such as the homeless or the extremely poor in developing countries. I also believe that homeless areas are at risk for the re-emergence of another deadly ancient disease, leprosy. Also known as Hansen's disease, leprosy involves a mycobacteria that is very difficult to transmit and very easy to treat with a cocktail of 3 antibiotics. Yet according to the CDC, there are more than 200,000 new cases of leprosy reported in the world every year, with 2/3 of them in India, home to 1/3 of the world's poor. The poor are disproportionately affected by this disease because close quarters, poor sanitation, and lack of prompt diagnosis or treatment can easily convert a disease that should be rare to one that is more common. They go on to say that there are, between 100 and 200 reported in the US every year. A study just released from the Keck Medical Center at the University of Southern California looked at 187 leprosy patients treated at the clinic from 1973 to 2018 and found that most were Latino originating from Mexico, where the disease is somewhat more common, and that there was on average a 3-year delay in diagnosis, during which time the side effects of the disease, usually irreversible even with treatment, begin to occur. So you get the point. With 60,000 homeless people and 75% of those lacking temporary shelter, there is a concern this disease could return, especially when we're talking about the rise in the illegal immigrant population coming through the borders. I can't tell you what we should or shouldn't do. I can just highlight the issues and show you the sources. The next important source here is from the Associated Press that are saying the fears of a leprosy outbreak are unfounded. I disagree. This is an opinion piece. Let me stress, they say, claim. Leprosy is making a comeback in LA and the city is at risk of an outbreak. The assessment from the AP is false. The number of cases in LA has stayed consistent. Multiple online reports are falsely asserting that Los Angeles is at risk for a leprosy outbreak. I don't know how this is being presented as a fact check. Now, I want to make sure I highlight the AP is saying it so you're getting a fair assessment, but let me just push back and say this. This is from a week ago. It doesn't matter if there's an increase or not. If people are saying the homeless problem going unsolved and the spread of rats it is occurring and it's a fact, that's creating circumstances where leprosy could re-emerge. What the AP has done here is conflate the number of outbreaks with the potential for an increase in outbreaks, which is a non sequitur. It makes no sense. Just because there isn't an outbreak now doesn't mean an outbreak can't occur. I don't know why the AP is trying to push this. It seems odd. They say over the last decade, the county has averaged 2 reported cases of leprosy every year. No more than 4 have been reported in any year during that time. The concern is, as the homeless crisis gets worse, as the feces problem gets worse, as the rat infestation gets worse, the potential for an escalation in leprosy is there, period. Not that it is happening, but that it could. And what the AP says is it's a fallacy to claim they're at risk of an outbreak because the outbreak hasn't happened. That makes no sense. So there you go. You're not going to take my word for it. If you don't believe me, fine. There's the AP. But I want to do a couple more things. In this story the other day from 2 days ago from the New York Times, Trump and California see the same homeless problem, but not the same solutions. Well, Trump wants to slap a violation on San Francisco. I don't think that'll solve anything. But I would like to stress, regardless of what the solution is, if California thinks they have a solution and they have failed this far, the problem has only gotten worse, they haven't dealt with it, I'm going to have to lean towards I don't trust their proposed solution. But there is an interesting tidbit here in the story. They say, San Francisco, open-air heroin use, sidewalks smeared in human feces, block-long homeless camps and people with severe mental illnesses wading through traffic in socks and hospital clothes. You would be forgiven if you thought that those descriptions of California's urban ills came from the mouth of the state's biggest detractor, President Trump. After all, as the president jetted off to the Bay Area on Tuesday for a fundraiser, he took a moment with reporters on Air Force One to fulminate against, quote, people living in our best highways, our best streets, our best entrances to buildings. Wow, that was a crafty statement. But no, the worst description of homelessness here frequently come from San Francisco's arch-liberal politicians who found themselves this week uncomfortably in agreement with the president they loathe. Mr. Trump's sudden fixation with California's homelessness problem is the rarest of cases where the state's left wing actually recognizes a problem the president feels strongly about. Numerous protesters and politicians said they found Mr. Trump's sudden interest in homelessness to be disingenuous and an example of the administration trying to score political points at the state's expense instead of actually grappling with a humanitarian crisis that has become the driving political issue in state and local politics. No. You get no exemptions from me, Democrats. Trump talked about the problem on the border the whole time, and the Democrats obstructed. And it got to a point where the crisis was so absurd that Democrats finally caved and acknowledged it. The media said there was no crisis. It was a hoax. It was made up by the administration. The Democrats haven't solved their problem, so no. You don't get to come out now when the Trump administration says, hey, when the Trump administration comes out and points to the problem and say, I don't believe Trump actually cares. That's so insane to me. You think the president doesn't care about homelessness? Dude, there is no evil villain. There is no great demon. There are only people who think their problems come first and foremost. If the president flies to California and sees a problem and brings it up, you can't then say, I don't believe he actually cares. Sorry. That's an ad hominem. You're attacking the character instead of addressing the point he's making, which is correct. California, you have a serious problem. A problem so bad that there have been numerous stories now, at least two, where business owners have said they are forced to close their business down because of the homelessness problem. This story from last month, a Sacramento business owner saying, I'm angry, forced to relocate. A couple weeks ago, there was a story of it was a liquor store, I believe, where the man said he was bitten numerous times by homeless people, and because of it, he was fed up and shutting down. This is not something you can ignore. And I have to stress, it's gotten to the point where it's in the news, it's in the New York Times. You want to ask me why I think Trump cares? Are there political points to be earned for Trump? Of course there are. But why does Trump care? The same as anybody who doesn't live in California would care. The New York Times writes about it. Forbes writes about it. The New York Post writes about it. How many stories have to pop up talking about the potential risk of diseases, the resurgence of diseases, for you to say, yeah, maybe Trump cares because it's now being highlighted? Out of sight, out of mind. If the president doesn't know about it, how can he address it? Well, he's actually a bit late to the party. People like me and many others have highlighted the problem. And don't look at me. Don't act like it's a partisan thing. The New York Times wrote about this. Forbes writes about this, blaming the Democrats. Maybe that's a bit hyperbolic to say blaming, but pointing out that even with Democrats in control, they couldn't solve the problem. So you know what? I know friends who don't live in California who are concerned about it. I'm not surprised the president would be. It's a crisis on his watch. And here's the funny part. I know If Trump doesn't do anything, what'll happen? They'll come out and say, Trump doesn't even care about the problem in California. Why is he talking about the border when he can't solve the problem in California? Blah, blah, blah. That's what they'll do. You know, if he doesn't address it, they'll say he doesn't care and he's ignoring it. And if he does, they'll say, oh, it's all for political points. Well, I don't know what to tell you, man. The problem's legit. It's getting worse. Story after story. We have a risk of a leprosy outbreak. At least that's what people are saying because of the rats and the human waste. We have even Democrats acknowledging the problem. Go ahead and accuse the president. I don't care. I don't know if a violation is going to solve anything. In fact, I'll say this. I don't think Trump giving, slapping SF with a violation will do anything. I don't. They don't care. San Francisco does not care. You know, I think to a certain extent they care. You know, they're probably going like, yeah, we'll deal with it. But they're not prioritizing the problem. They're not solving the problem. They'll get slapped with a violation. It won't do anything. So I don't think even Trump addressing this is going to change anything. I don't know what Trump can do. We have seen other action. This story from just the other day, Trump revokes waiver for California to set higher auto emission standards. Now, there is a lot of environmental action going towards California. This is a completely different story. But the reason I highlight this is because it's actually something being done that's going to impact California. A violation won't do that. Let's say you're speeding. Let's say you're rich and you speed. You get pulled over, you get a ticket. Hey, don't speed again. You're going to pay a $100 fine. They don't care. They're rich. They'll speed again. I don't think this will solve the problem. I don't know what Trump should or shouldn't do. All I know is, I guess it's good he's addressing it and shining light on the situation. I don't know what will solve this problem. What I do know is it's not being taken care of. And hopefully this escalates it. California is becoming a wasteland. And I'm sorry, it is. Not all of the state, just many of the cities. I'll leave it there. Stick around. Next segment will be coming up at youtube.com/TimCastNews at 6 p.m. Thanks for hanging out. I will see you all next time.